I call to order this meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. This afternoon, we have 5 members and our student representative present. I will declare a quorum. At this time, if you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, we'll have approval of today's agenda.
Move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guessford.
That was Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Ridenhour.
One or the other. We're close enough.
Have any any discussion or questions about the agenda for this afternoon? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the agenda? Okay, unanimous. Student rep concurs. Next is approval of the minutes.
Madam President, I move for the approval of the closed session minutes dated Tuesday, July 17th, 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Guessford. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any additions or corrections to that set of minutes? Okay, hearing none, we move to the vote. All those in favor? Okay, unanimous, 5. Motion carries.
Madam President, I move for the second approval of the business meeting minutes dated Tuesday, July 17th, 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Guessford. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Any additions or corrections to the minutes of the business meeting? Hearing none, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor? Okay, 5 votes, and the student member concurs. Motion carries. At this time, we have public comment. I have no one signed up in advance. Is there anyone out there who would like to speak during the public comment portion of our meeting today? Okay, then we'll move on to old business. Our first item of old business is the second reading of proposed changes to policy IKE, promotion and retention of students. Mr. Trotta?
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
The Board of Education approved the first reading of the proposed changes to policy IKE at its public business meeting conducted on July the 17th. A notice was placed on board docs and the school system's website following the first reading in order to seek public comment on the proposed changes. No comments were received. The Board of Education Policy Committee conducted a public work session on July 24th. At that time, they slightly modified the definition of the term promotion. The term promotion now reads as follows: the advancement of a student who met the academic standards for moving to the next grade level. The Policy Committee did not recommend any other changes, and at this point in time, they are requesting the Board of Education's approval of the second reading of the proposed changes to this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy IKE entitled Promotion and Retention of Students.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Discussion? Questions? Mr. Guessford?
I have one question for you. Under the definitions, we have acceleration and promotion. Why is there not one for retention?
There was some discussion at the Policy Committee meeting on the 24th, and the committee in general concluded that they didn't think that it was required to define that term, that they felt it was a term that the community would understand, that a student was not moving forward to the next grade.
Seems like that would be missing if you're having the other two in there. Why wouldn't you just throw in retention?
I would defer to the board president to see if she has some comments, because actually it was her recommendation that it be included, but after some further discussion among the 3 board members, there was a general consensus that perhaps it was not needed. But Madam President, I defer to you.
I think Mr. Trotta stated it well. I thought, too, that we could include a third definition, that being retention, but after discussing it with the other members of the committee, I felt that most people have an understanding of what it means for a student to be retained, and that there wasn't a need for it. Any other questions or comments?
One other thing, on the under policy statement procedures, at the very last sentence in C, it states, "The final decision relative acceleration or retention is the responsibility of the school system professional, final decision is the school system professional personnel." Why don't we include the parents in that? Because a lot of times, parents will say, "I don't want my child moving forward."
If you look at the, some of the other comments in that same paragraph, 4C, and one of the things that my office highly recommends is that if a student is not progressing as they should, that there should be constant communication with the parent and consultation with the parent. And so you can see that the policy says that conferences with the parents shall be held if there's concern about either, about retention and also in the situation where a student is accelerated to the next grade. Early notification to parents of high school seniors, because occasionally parents are not aware that their children are not doing well academically, so we always encourage, particularly students who are preparing to graduate, that their parents know they're not on track to graduate. And this is something that happens frequently and often during the school year prior to graduation, that parents are alerted. So there is this interaction that occurs with parents with regard to these decisions. But ultimately, and I would defer to the educators, it's something that's, it's the classroom teachers, it's the school principal, it's the assistant principal, looking at the students' progress to determine whether they should be retained or accelerated.
Well, I think to Mr. Gessler's point, it's important, as you've described, Mr. Trotta, that we do involve the parents, but I think when it comes down to that final decision, we wouldn't want it to be in our professional opinion, in the best interest for a child to be retained and have a parent override that, or for a child to be accelerated or not accelerated and have the parent override that. We're slow to accelerate students in the next grade unless there's really, some driving force there, and I can't imagine we wouldn't have the parents' agreement on that. And likewise, we don't want to retain students that should be promoted, but there are occasions that we would have to have the final say, and I think that's why that line's there. But absolutely, the parents are involved every step of the way, whether it's retention or acceleration.
But I have heard parents talk to me and said, the school put my daughter through, and they're not reading at the reading level that they should be. They're not at the level they need to be, and then we keep pushing them through. And I think that becomes an issue where teachers have, in the past, maybe that's that no student left behind, have probably said, yeah, they shouldn't go, but the system says they need to go.
Well, that wouldn't be my expectation. I think it's probably a little bit different conversation, the academic ability of a child and retention acceleration. I think you're pointing to parents concerned about their child not being at the appropriate grade level, but maybe that same parent that's concerned about that also does not want their child retained. They want their child's skill set accelerated to the point they would be on grade level, and that's certainly the charge that we have, to get all children up to grade level or beyond. That's what we need to work on.
Anyone else? Mrs. Murray, did you have? No, okay. Okay, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor of approval of the second reading of proposed changes to policy IKE entitled Promotion and Retention of Students. Please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed?
Oh, no.
1 opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Trotta. We have another one.
Yes, thank you. The Board of Education approved the first reading of the proposed changes to policy IND, which is entitled Teaching About Controversial Issues, at its public business meeting on July the 17th. A notice was placed on board docs, and members of the community were offered an opportunity to provide comments. We did receive a comment from a member of the community. That information was provided to all the board members and the superintendent by the board president. Want to make sure that you received that comment. The policy committee conducted its public work session on July the 24th. It considered the comments offered by Mr. Ridenhour at a previous meeting concerning the policy, but the policy committee did not recommend any changes. Another document that I had circulated to the members of the board based on a comment that was offered by the president of the association who attended the last public work session of the committee was Article 6.3 of the collective bargaining agreement, which talks about academic freedom, which explains the parameters on teaching of certain topics in the classroom setting. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy INB entitled Teaching About Controversial Issues, Political Activities.
Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Questions or discussion? Mr. Ridenhour.
Just very quickly, I'm going to support this. I'm really probably, I guess, waiting to see the regulations that come out with it. I still have some concerns because I think it's a little narrow, particularly where it says issues are most effective when planned within the school to meet curricular goals. There are going to be issues coming around that there may not be any curricular goals to deal with at that point in time. Does that mean you're afraid to discuss that with your students? I would hope not, but we never knows. But I will support it with reservations.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no other discussion, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of approval of the second reading of proposed changes to policy INB entitled Teaching About Controversial Issues, Political Activities, please raise your hand. 5, and the student member concurs. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Trotta. We'll move to new business. First item of new business is our consent agenda. Our consent agenda. Mr. Bakdal, Supervisor of Purchasing. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, President Williams, board members, Dr. Michael. Today I have 4 items for your review. These items were reviewed by our Purchasing Review Committee and are being recommended for approval, and staff is available if you have any questions.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the awards, renewals, and procurements for information technology assessment to Securance Consulting of $41,192, Athletic Fields Winterization renewal to Shades of Green Landscaping at a cost of $37,500, Baseball and Softball Fields Restoration renewal to Shades of Green Landscaping at a cost of $65,800, and Backup as a Service BOSS and Disaster Recovery as a Service DROS extension to Innovative Inc. at a cost of $264,000.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Questions or discussion? Okay, and we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of today's motion to approve the consent agenda, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. 5, we're unanimous. Student member concurs. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Bickford.
Thank you.
Brings us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Mike, oh, no, I'm sorry. I jumped ahead. Mr. Wallace? Our second item under new business is the construction documents for the new Sharpsburg Elementary School with Mr. Prue, Mr. Rollins, Mr. Eichelvich, and Mr. Fisher. Is that correct? Okay, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michaels. It is my pleasure this afternoon to welcome our architects and project manager from SEI Architects to present to you the the construction documents for the new Sharpsburg Elementary project. They're going to walk you through where we are in terms of what the design looks like as we get ready to head to procurement. The plan documents have been in the boardroom for you the last number of days so that you had an opportunity to review that. And before I turn the floor over, I do also want to make note of the gentleman behind me is Mr. Brad Otto, who's a project manager in our facilities planning and development. A lot of work has been done by this team, including Mr. Otto, getting the documents to the point where we are, and Mr. Otto is also going to be the project manager leading the Sharpsburg project for Washington County Public Schools moving forward. So I wanted to make reference to Mr. Otto. I'm not sure how often you get to see him, but he's done a lot of great work here to assist. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lukovich. Or to Mr. Fisher.
Well, thank you all very much for giving us the opportunity today to bring this to you. We have a PowerPoint presentation. Oh, great, it's up here. Right now we are in the project schedule about to announce the bid, pending approval from you all today. We'll be announcing for bid and then moving forward, procuring bids from everyone, procuring contracts after that to the apparent low. Looking to have the contractors be awarded a notice to proceed to start the construction in this October with eventual opening of the new school facility in September of 2020. So just to refresh your memories on where we are, this is Sharpsburg Elementary School, which is along Shepherdstown Pike, right where Shepherdstown Pike becomes Main Street in Sharpsburg. You may hear it referred to as both streets. The existing school is tight up on the street, but with the existing setbacks outlined in yellow, we're going to be going a little bit further back into the site. So here's our proposed site plan that we are going to be looking to do. So the existing school facility will be left in operation while construction is going on. That's what we have outlined in the front as a memorial garden. As an add alternate to the project, pending where the bids come in, we're looking to celebrate the historic 1936 building with landscaping and some sidewalks, and kind of preserve that as a historic preservation, nod to historic preservation. At the back of the site, we will be building our new school. Right now, there is an existing retaining wall in between existing retaining wall running up and down, so there's actually a drop in elevation on our site. It's kind of shown diagrammatically below in this section here. So we'll actually be entering on the upper level of our two-story building, and then we'll be building down below on the other side of that retaining wall. Kind of get into the aspects of what that does for us, but really the great thing about that is it allows us to hide the mass of this building. Being in a very small historic community, we're cognizant of trying not to overpower the town with a rather large building. So at the front of the building, behind the current school, there'll be a bus loop for buses to drop off students in the morning, as well as a parking lot and a parent drop-off loop for any parents who elect to drive their students to school in the morning. We'll also have playfields at the very back of the site with a secondary service lot behind the school in between the playfields, and the cafeteria gym that serves kind of a area for custodians to park or for after hours if anyone wants to come and use the fields. And then we will have an area for hard surface play, basketball courts, as well as playgrounds back behind the school. So here's a rendering of what the exterior of the building will look like. This is from the front, kind of where you enter the site, looking across the bus loop towards the main entrance. You can kind of see graphically in this shot here how it appears as a one-story building, even though we are doing 2 stories. That's behind this, this wall over here is where the building drops down, and that's where we have our larger volume spaces like a gym and a cafeteria, utilizing that drop in grade to hide a lot of that. Our main entrance right here will be a larger volume to try to attract folks to there, so there's no confusion about where they need to go to enter the building. This brick box over here is going to be the main administrative functions, which is strategically located to have a wide range of visibility over the entirety of the site. You can see who's coming in, who's coming out. And then this gabled volume at the end is where the classes are. It's be more private functions of the school. So you can understand a little bit better what all these different colors are, I wanted to zoom in a little so you can see what the different materials we're calling out. The red is a traditional red look brick. We are doing slightly larger size units than a standard brick in an effort to make sure we're getting the most value. The multicolored over here is a concrete masonry unit. And then the beige color up top will be a metal panel. We've made sure to put that metal panel quite high up, so no students will be banging against it. No rocks will be getting kicked out of lawnmowers to damage or ding that. So the floor plan of the building is shown here. This is the entry level, which is actually the upper level. There haven't been too many significant changes since the last time we came and presented here, but essentially we've got our main entrance. The classroom wing is down at the bottom of the sheet here, and from that classroom wing you walk past the offices to get to the classrooms. This allows us to be able to lock down the classroom wing from the main entrance for after hours use or in case of anyone unauthorized coming into the building. So that lower level, this, as you can see from all this kind of hatchwork over here, is tucked behind that retaining wall. So while it is below the entrance level, it will have regular height windows, doors walking right out. It'll feel just like a regular level, even though it is below the main entrance level. It's not a basement. We have the public functions to the top of the page here. So our gym, cafeteria, the instructional resource center are there. And then they're across the courtyard from that classroom volume. Again, we have a connecting corridor between the two, which allows us the ability to lock down those more private spaces from the rest of the building. So this is an axonometric of the entirety of the building if you were to kind of slice off the roof and look down on it. So to help kind of see how this is working in 3 dimensions. And then take just a quick little tour through the building here. So first it'll take you into the main entrance so you can see a little more an experience from that main entrance. This is inside. This volume over here, walking through that will lead you to the classes. And then we have some windows down to see into that lower level. We wanted to make sure when visitors come to the building, they can see where all the gym and the cafeteria and the functions that they might need to come to for a talent show or any events like that might be happening. And then downstairs we have the gym and the cafeteria. There will be an operable partition between the two, so if there's a very large event happening, we can open up that wall and fill in both spaces together. And then here's a view from the cafeteria looking towards the stage. As we noted, there's also the IRC, essentially library, which will be right off of a courtyard in the middle of the building, which allows us to bring some natural light into these spaces. So here is the IRC. We will have a stair leading from the IRC up to what's called a learning studio that's being built as an ad alternate. So depending on how the costs come in on bid day, we're hoping to include that to connect those two programs. And then here's a view of the courtyard. This is a view that, standing from the library, this is what you might see, or the opposite view. These are the classrooms on that side. They'll be looking into there during the day. And then we have our typical classrooms. This is a 3-round school, 3 classes per grade. So typical classroom view right in here. We have our main entrance from the hall, and then there is also a kind of glassed-in door to a shared space for that 3 rounds, what we're calling a collaborative learning area. Each grade will have their own, and all 3 classes in that grade will open to it to encourage small group outs and a co-teaching between different teachers in that same grade level. We've put a lot of glass into this area to make sure that the teachers in the classrooms will be able to see and monitor what's going on in these collaborative learning areas. But then there's not much glass from here into the corridor to make sure anyone who's unauthorized to be in the building isn't able to see what's going on in those spaces. We can keep the students in a more secure area. And that's a walkthrough of the building as it currently stands. With that, Mr. Rollins?
I think our one, final comment before we turn over for questions, and I want to commend our architectural team as well as the engineers, the facilities planning team as well for bringing to you a building that is going to be a great addition to the town of Sharpsburg, is state-of-the-art, but does also bring us a few concerns as we head into the budget. We believe we have a building that we have engineered to meet our budget on bid day. We also have a number of items, as Mr. Fisher mentioned, the stairs in the IRC as add alternates, and we're hoping to take as many of those as possible. Our recent experience on some projects, specifically with the downtown project, was that on bid day we came in under where we were trending with estimates, and we're hoping that to carry forward as we bring this project to fruition here in the next couple of weeks as we open bids. So just wanted to make the board aware of that. That we do have some concerns, but we are confident we're going to bring this project in at budget. And with that, the team is here and happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Crew. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the construction documents prepared by Smolin, sorry if I messed up your names, Emer Ilkovich Architects, SEI, for the new Sharpsburg Elementary School.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And is there discussion, questions? I have one. The interior colors, are they just sample colors, or are those colors that have already been determined to be used?
So interior colors, we typically won't finalize those until after a contractor's been selected and they choose which manufacturers they're going to utilize. Since this will be a competitively bid project, we'll have multiple manufacturers, and no 2 companies' colors are exactly alike. So we like to wait until we know exactly which manufacturer to pin down the colors.
Okay, thank you. I might tell you that there was a lot of discussion about the exterior design of the building. I very much like what I see here. I think it's very attractive, and I think it'll be a nice addition to the town. So, thank you for that.
Mrs. Williams?
Mhm.
I also like the outside design. I think it's beautiful. And I have one little question, and it says, we read this as Sharpsburg Elementary School, but I see on the photo, front and back, it says Sharpsburg School. Will it read Sharpsburg Elementary School?
So on the existing Sharpsburg Elementary School, the 1936 building, there is a cast stone sign that reads Sharpsburg School that was kind of hidden by a 1960s addition. As part of our historic preservation goals, we're trying to uncover that sign, take it off the existing building, and replace it onto the
Okay.
new building.
All right,
We
thank
did
you.
something similar in Morgansville Elementary. We took a cast concrete piece off of that school, and it's mounted right in the front of the school as a signage, so.
I think in Salem Avenue Elementary, you took part of the
Mhm.
school and put it on the front as well, so thank
Sort
you.
of
Yeah.
a homage to the old school.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Now, I wanted to ask about the Memorial Gardens. Could you tell us a little bit about what the plan is for that? area?
Sure. Let me just try to zip back to that overall site plan. Essentially, the existing facility was built in 1936, and then there was an addition put on in 1960, an addition put on in 1960-something, I forget the exact date, and in the 1980s as well, another addition was put on. So the 1936 building, the original building, is listed on the Historic Register. So in working with the Maryland Historic Trust, we're trying to emphasize that historic portion of the building. So I went a little too far. So this kind of U shape that we're showing here is the footprint of the existing original 1936 building. So what we'd be looking to do as part of this memorial garden is put down some pathways that mimic the corridors of the original 1936 building, as well as the two existing entrances. Back in the day, you know, there's a girls' entrance and a boys' entrance, so we'll have those two entrances leading to, or pathways leading to those two entrances. And then the spaces where the classrooms were around the corridors, we'll be doing plantings, so sort of trees, ornamental shrubbery and flowers. There's a landscaping plan that outlines those in the bid documents, if you'd care to take a look at those. And then using salvaged stones from the site to mark the perimeter of that original 1936 building.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, and we'll call for the vote. Okay, the motion is to approve the construction documents prepared by Mr. Ilkovich, architects, for the new Sharpsburg Elementary School. All those in favor? Okay, we're unanimous, and the student member concurs. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And now that brings us to the superintendent's report.
I don't have any significant reports today. We do have a number of reports to the board that are coming up after personnel, so I'll allow my time to go towards those items, because I know a couple of board members need to get out of here today. I would want to remind the public that tomorrow we're back with administrative staff, back in full swing with our A&S meetings tomorrow and Thursday. Also, 2 weeks away will be New Teacher Academy. Our new teachers will be joining us full-time. Many of them have been in over the summer for professional development. 3 weeks, we'll be back with teachers, and 4 weeks from today, students will return. So our summer's getting away from us quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. Okay, that brings us to personnel action. Dr. Bishop?
Good afternoon, President Williams and elected board members. As discussed earlier in closed session, there are several staff changes for your review. So at this time, I ask for your approval of today's personnel actions.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? Okay, all those in favor of today's personnel actions as presented, closed session? Okay, we're unanimous. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to reports to the board. Did you want to introduce our guests, or did you want me to do that?
I can do that.
All right.
We work extensively with Maryland Food Bank. A lot of our schools have worked with the food bank over the years, and Nancy Smith asked if she could come and speak to the board. So with that, you're welcome to come forward and introduce your guest and just bring us a brief update of the Maryland Food Bank.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael, Madam President, and members of the board. My name is Nancy Smith. I've been with the Maryland Food Bank since 2005. The Maryland Food Bank started in 1979. One of the programs that I'm most fond of is called our School Pantry Program. School Pantry Program was, the Maryland Food Bank took in 10 small little school pantries. And we're saying, what is a school pantry program? It's a makeshift program inside of a public school. And it's where parents, if families of the students, if they're falling on hard times, they can go to the school pantry and they can get a couple bags of food. There's also a volunteer component there. So if a parent wanted to help the school file, paint, rake, they can do that. Since 2003, when we took over the school pantry, 10 small school pantries from a nonprofit. Now, fast forward, we have grown the school pantry program to about 210 throughout the state. I had a discussion with Senator Serafini, and he says, you need to get out and just get in front of the board and tell them what a great program this is. And I said, I will do that. So currently we have about 12 school pantries in Washington County. And I think one of the most, if I was to say the two new components to the school pantry would be, we hired a nutritionist, and we do not allow the schools to order sodas, cakes, pastries, and candy. It is not to go into the school pantry. So we're looking at a healthier option for families, nutritious, healthy option, and I think this is the way we can do it. So, but thank you for allowing us to come into Washington County. It is our hope to maybe open up 3 more school pantries in the school year. We'll see how that goes. But I wanted to introduce Frank. Frank is our manager at Hagerstown, local boy. And I'll let Frank finish this out.
Good afternoon, members of the board and Superintendent Michael. So my name is Frank Ducey, and I am the programs manager for our Western branch in Hagerstown. We're located on McRae Court, so we're right down the road off of 81. And I relocated to this area last year in September, and have since kind of took a deep dive into the community and become really invested in what's going on here. And being here, it helps tremendously with getting to know, what makes Washington County tick, and, what the specific issues are and what we can do as the Maryland Food Bank to help move things along. And just to give you some numbers on, food insecurity in our service area, which is Western Maryland, Garrett, Allegheny, Washington, and Frederick County, there's over 47,000 food insecure individuals, and of those 47,000, 20,000 are children. So it is quite an issue, but we're here, and I'm really excited about what we have in store for the future. Some exciting initiatives in the last 10 months that we've embarked upon are restarting volunteerism at our Western branch, kind of getting the community involved and helping us out, and feeding the 12 school pantries that we're currently involved with. So that's exciting, and re-energizing the community around our mission. So I'm very excited, and thank you very much for your time.
We gave you a handout. This is just a report of our school pantry FY18 report. This gives you a brief look at 5 years, what we've done in Washington County. And it's by pounds distributed into Washington County. And then we have our newsletter that was just hot off the press. So again, we thank you very much, and we hope to be serving in Washington County for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Members, any questions? Thank you both very much for coming.
Our district assessment committee's here. Part of the law that we've had to review and establish a district assessment committee. And Dr. Bishop has chaired that for us along with Mr. Becker, and they're here to report on their findings today.
Well, good afternoon, President Williams and board members and Dr. Michael. I thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I thank Dr. Bishop and her staff, Karen Brown and Maureen Margovich, for their work on the board side of the committee, because the groundwork that was laid literally a year ago with Dr. Bishop and Maureen, we were able to sit down and figure out what steps to take to meet the requirements of the law that was in place for our joint committee, and it truly has been a joint committee. So we'll move through pretty quickly. The goal is to maximize instructional time. It's called more learning, less testing, and our goal, meeting as a committee of parents and teachers, educators, administrators, to figure out what can we do within Washington County Public Schools to maximize instructional time so that the students can get the most they can out of an instructional day, an instructional year. As the screen shows, House Bill 461, Senate Bill 452, they passed unanimously, 139 to 0 and 47 to 0. The goal was to cap testing at 2.2%. Originally, the number was 2%, and through the committees in Annapolis deciding how to best do this, they came up with 2.2%, 2.3% in 8th grade, and that ends up being, let's put some hours on that, 23.8 hours from pre-K to grade 7, 24.8 hours in grade 8, and 25.7 hours of testing in high school. Washington County Public Schools was actually well in line with those testing numbers already. Some counties far exceeded those numbers. Washington County, in a few areas, had exceeded, but has been very close to that 2.2 number prior to this taking place. And the goal was to create district committees, which we've done, and maybe to transition to performance-based, especially a social studies test, move that to performance-based instead of a norm reference. And local control. If the committee met and decided, this element is really important and it might make us at 2.25% in a grade level, but it was important to the committee that could be allowed with the local control that the committee had. The committee members, their titles are above. I'd like to include the names to publicly thank them. As you know, April and I were involved. Maureen Markovich. Carlos Malad is our UNISERV director. He's unable to be here today. Dawn Miller is a parent. Renee Scott is a parent. And Carolyn Sterling is a community member. And administrators included Tamsin Williamson, Pangborn Elementary Assistant Principal, Gary Willow, Boonesboro Middle School Principal, Rachel Kane Kirkpatrick, Williamsport High School Assistant Principal, Diana Gray, Old Forge Elementary Teacher, Cruz Rudisil, Springfield Middle School Teacher, and Tom McNicholas, a South Hagerstown High School Teacher. And the timeline speaks for itself. From a year ago in 2017 to where we are today, we met throughout the year. November, the committee bounced around names, the committee chairs, bounced around names to who could want to take on this role, to meet in the evenings for a couple hours each night when we met. And we actually were lucky enough to have a lot of volunteers who were interested. And so we had this great committee come together. We met monthly. And in June, we had some recommendations that went before the curriculum team, and now we're bringing some information to you as the board. And, the definition of assessment, that is not the teacher-created quiz or test or the choir director or band director's playing test or quiz. These are typically norm reference tests that are either federally or state mandated or locally mandated tests that we may feel as Washington County Public Schools are important that all of our students participate in. The HSA, the SRI, the Scholastic Reading Inventory, the Common Core, PARC. So those are tests that are mandated, not the teacher-created test or quiz, essay, activity to identify the strengths and weaknesses of specific students and how progress has been made. not included AP tests, SAT, IB, the ACT, again, the teacher developed, and samplings. The KRA was a test that got a lot of headlines, and I think a lot of the headlines for the wrong reasons, because it's our goal as Washington County Public School to identify students and where their strengths and weaknesses are and what we need to address, because basically that is assessing students and their knowledge prior to entering Washington County Public Schools. And purpose of the committee, short and sweet, to identify how much assessment, the tests that should be delivered by our county for our students, to review those tests. And a lot of credit to Maureen and April for their work to use some documents in place with a rubric that rather than recreate the wheel, we were able to use a document that was in place and make it work best for Washington County Public Schools and the committee we had here. And so that third square with the bullets below, we wanted to make some recommendations. Time required to administer, duplicity. Do we necessarily have to be administering each assessment? The purpose of the assessment, to make sure we identified why it's in place. The feedback. Some assessments, the feedback is literally within seconds, and others it takes several months to get feedback, and that's where the timeliness comes in. Thank you, Dr. Bishop.
So as Neil stated, as part of the Teach More, Test Less Act, we really looked at our local assessments, those that we are not mandated to administer, and this is the list of what the committee reviewed. They reviewed Park English 9 and Park Geometry, the MAP, which is an acronym we use frequently, the ERI, it was formerly known as the SRI, we're trying to get used to that, calling it the right name. We also looked at the PSAT, the COGAT, as well as the PreviLearn interims and the Cornerstone tasks. And after a review of each of those, then we put together a list of our recommendations, and as Neil said, we looked at a variety of factors, and our recommendations go from the first one, which is really no change to the PSAT administration. We feel that's one we want to continue, to then the one right after it where we, as a committee, have recommended that we eliminate Park English 9 and Park Geometry testing since we're not required. The committee felt that those could be two assessments that we could no longer need to administer to all of our students. The committee recommended that we continue using the PreviLearn interims. And the committee also recommended that our Cornerstone tasks, that we really look at using those more as a performance task and change the intended use of those. We also recommend that the curriculum team look for an assessment perhaps other than MAP. We felt that perhaps the ERI could be used in grades 3 to 5 instead of MAP. And they also recommended to reduce ERI testing to once a year in the spring, as well as to set grade band targets. And then the final recommendation of the committee was to change the COGAT administration to February for grade 1 and new students, and therefore only retest the COGAT for those students recommended in grade 5, as well as for new students as they come in. So the additional recommendation that the committee has is to continue to gather feedback. We talked a little bit about, in particular, the Cornerstone tasks and the PreviLearn interims, that we felt that as a committee we had gathered some information, but we really extended the recommendation to gather more feedback on those two assessments from principals and teachers about their needs, as well as also any concerns as a next step for the curriculum team. And then looking at our committee as a whole, we took a moment in our last meeting to talk about what we would like to do as our next steps as a group. The law actually encourages the committee to meet year-long every other year. But this year, we met for half a year and just had a reduced number of meetings, and we felt that was very successful. So we're actually recommending that we continue to meet annually in the spring. We felt that also encourages participation and a little easier to commit to 4 or 5 meetings instead of a whole year's worth of monthly meetings. Another recommendation we had was to include a student, at least one, on the committee to include their recommendations and feedback. We would like to, at our next committee meeting, to get some follow-up from the curriculum team on our recommendations that we made this year. And throughout our conversation, we spoke quite a bit about struggling learners and our neediest children. And we'd like to revisit that again and focus on how testing and assessment benefits our struggling learners and how we are supporting them. We are recommending that the next assessment committee review PreviLearn again. This was a new assessment for us this year. We felt it was the one that most completely aligns with PARCC and prepares our students with PARCC. And it was new, however, so after recommending some feedback on that, as a committee, we would like to revisit that particular assessment again. And then as a committee, we'd like to also next year just get an update on where is Maryland with the comprehensive assessment program. It is a program that is changing, so we thought we would ask for a review of the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program to begin our work next year. So again, I'd like to just reiterate what Neil said, a big thank you to all of the members that were on the District Committee on Assessment. They really were very dedicated. It was a good, hardworking group, and we thank everyone who have served this year, and we are hoping to invite them back next year. So that concludes our report to the board.
Comments, questions? Comments? I'd just like to say that I think the 2 suggestions, the meet annually, I think that's a very good thing, and including the student on the committee, I think is another good idea. I'd like to thank the 2 of you for facilitating such collaboration, and I thank the committee members for the fine work that they did. So thank you both for being here and sharing this with us, keeping us informed. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It truly was people sometimes say they're on a committee and they get frustrated on a committee. They feel like, what did we do? Well, we definitely, and again, luckily we have someone like Karen who was able to keep all of our notes in line, and it was a very productive group with a lot of very positive discussion about what's going to be best for kids in the school system. So thank you for the opportunity to jump into what is kind of a state mandate, but we truly made the best of something that came out of the legislature.
It's great to hear.
Yep.
Thank you again. Anything else, Dr. Michael, before we? Okay.
Committee reports, I think.
All right. That brings us to board committee reports. Start down there with Mr. Ridenour. Mr. Ridenour, do you have anything for us this
The
afternoon?
HR committee plans to meet towards the end of this month, I believe it is.
Okay, thank you.
Tuesday at the end of the month.
On the Tuesday, the last Tuesday.
28th, maybe.
28th,
28th.
29th, I couldn't,
So
sorry.
8/28. Thank you. Mr. Gessford, facilities?
Facilities has nothing to report.
Mr. Bickford?
Finance Committee will be meeting on Tuesday, August 28th at 8 a.m. in the Operations Conference Room.
Thank you. Mrs. Murray?
The Curriculum and Instruction Committee will be meeting September 25th. We're not meeting this month because we had some scheduling conflicts, but we will be meeting September 25th in the board conference room.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Fisher is not here to report on policy review and development, so we'll just pass on that. Under miscellaneous business, we have consideration of future agenda items. There's a future agenda item list that you have. Things coming up for August. Quarterly health care update. In September, we have a report on student achievement and a report on discipline in school suspension and out-of-school suspension. In October, the master plan update, and in November, another quarterly health care update. So those are things on the horizon. If you have any suggestions for things you would like to see as agenda items, please let either Dr. Michael or Mr. Stauffer or myself know so that we can have your wants, concerns placed on the agenda for the future. That's it for miscellaneous business. That brings us to board member comments. Would you like to begin down there, Mr. Mackley?
I have no report at this time.
Thank you. You will once school starts, I know. Mrs. Murray?
I have no comment.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Nothing? Mr. Guestwood?
Not a thing.
Not a thing.
Nothing at this time.
Nothing, and I have nothing. Dr. Michael, would you like the last word? Do you have anything you'd like to comment before we close? All right, thank you. Meeting adjourned.